committed to emancipating Indigenous rights. And I've been in the research game for about 15 years, and also a community psychologist. And I have 3 boys. What are they now? 5, 11 and 14. And I live here in Tamaki Makaurau in Te Whau, Blockhouse Bay, with my partner. And I'm also in the part of the first cohort for Leadership for Good. And we've just finished the first part of it, and it's been an interesting exploration. And so I look forward to the kōrero today and hopefully provide some of my thinking and thoughts to what we're about to explore. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Teah. That was beautiful. Martin, did you want to introduce yourself?
Kia ora, everyone. My te reo is nowhere comparable to Teah's, so I won't even attempt to authentically follow in her footsteps. I was born in Auckland and in Greylin, and grew up in the East Coast in Whakatane, where I was sort of grew up until I moved to Auckland to go to university, and then went to Auckland University and have spent since then the last 28, 30 years living in Auckland, apart from a short stint for a few years to live in Queenstown, which we'll get to in terms of my journey. I live with my husband, who I've been with for 25 years, and we have a 13-year-old son who is a home for life child, which is permanent foster care. He's about to turn 14. And my background has been dominated 20 years in HR, with a strong focus on diversity, inclusion, and culture and engagement. And then the last 3 years, I've spent working on social enterprises with my husband, all focused on LGBTQI plus inclusion. And there's a number of different organizations under that umbrella, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. And so my whole focus now is around social justice, focused on our rainbow communities at work and in different other elements. And I love getting out of bed every morning to be able to do that and feel like you're actually making a difference in people's lives. Thank you.
Kia ora, Martin. Thank you so much for that. Rachel, last but not least.
Kia ora koutou. Ko ai au, ko maunga tere te maunga, ko rakuhiri te awa, ko tuahiwi te marae, ko nai tuahiri te hapu, ko nai tahu te iwi, ko Rachel nai ahau. So hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I whakapapa as well. Similarly to Teah, I whakapapa to nai tahu down south in Ōtautahi Christchurch, but also whakapapa to Pākehā as well, both my mother and father's side. I grew up in the far north, very far away from my marae and my awa and my maunga, so that's been a big journey for me recently to reconnect with those spaces. But I grew up in a small town, Kirikiri, far up north, and then moved to Wellington, where I studied design and lived there for about 7 years. So my heart is still very much in Wellington. I love that city. I then moved to Tamaki Makaurau about 3 years ago for this role at Innovation Unit. And a little bit about that, I guess, is that Innovation Unit is a small not-for-profit organisation, and we're a social change agency. So we help government agencies and other organisations to learn about complex social issues and try and act on those issues as well, alongside communities. So I've been working in that space for a good few years now, for about 7 years, and still have so much to learn. So really looking forward to this kōrero and learning from these two as well. Thanks, team.
Kia ora, Rachel. That was a great quick overview. So I think we might just go into our big questions. So we'll keep it simple to start with. Well, simple. We'll start with the basics, really. Authentic value. So when you talk authentic value, it's a word that is actually used a lot. Like if you look at, if you Google it right now, then there is an enormous amount, and also in businesses, they're starting to use it a lot. But when you really ask the question, what are you actually talking about? You know, what do you mean by authentic value? Often people do scratch their head, and we see that through the leading change for good cohorts as well, that, you know, you start with that, but then after 17 weeks everybody goes back to it and sort of goes, oh, actually I have more questions than I started with. However, we are going to try and ask you the question, how would you define authentic value? Who wants to go first? Martin?
Okay, well, yeah, look, hopefully we will take a different take. If we look at authentic value and then the for good, maybe we split them into two. For me, when I've talked about authenticity and being authentic and the value that brings, is literally about being your complete, letting everyone be their complete selves, their whole selves, and bringing all of their background, their warts, their imperfections into our organizations, and that makes our organizations richer, more powerful, more interesting, and certainly harnesses a huge amount more capability. But the dilemma is that authenticity also makes people vulnerable, and vulnerability is traditionally in our organizations, Victorian, you know, hierarchies and all the rest have been seen as a weakness, but in fact vulnerability is a strength, and authenticity is a strength. And with that authenticity has to be an underlying drive that's based on values or based on a broader purpose. So you don't have to work in a social justice organization to bring that, but you have to be able to be going to work or work in an organization for something bigger than yourself, and something bigger than profit. You know, going to work for profit is not why you go to work. People don't go to work for profit. They go to work to make a difference, to create change, to do something good, to impact on people, to make a difference in people's lives. And so to do that properly, authenticity to me is everything. It's you know, it's you don't have to change your shirt when you leave the house to be great at what you do. You just have to be you. That's what it says. That's what it is to me.
Awesome. Rachel, did you wanna?
Awesome. No pressure following that, Martin. That was it's very helpful. I was really stumped, to be honest, when you sent this question through. I was like, oh wow, this isn't language I'm used to. So I kind of had to think about it. I guess for me, authentic value means knowing that you are creating genuine change for good in the world. And when I think about what that means for me, is it's knowing that people can point to something and say that has changed and has been better because of something that you have done. And in my work, that means when you go and talk to people and they share often very personal stories about the challenges that they are facing in their lives, it means being able to hold yourself accountable and go back to those people in, 2 months or 2 years or 10 years and actually listen to them again and hear them say, yes, this has changed, even if it's in a small way, this has gotten better because I shared my story with you or because we worked on that mahi together. So to me, that's what authentic value is when you can really actually point to that change in the world. Go Teah.
Beautiful.
Alright. I've had the privilege of sitting with this question for a little while, since its discovery, if you like, the languaging of authentic value in the course. And at first, I couldn't stand it. I didn't like the word authenticity. I think it's kind of denotes some kind of objectivity, some type of judgment and labeling. And then I automatically kind of linked it in with like this 100% genuine leather kind of corded all, that it's like you're authentic or you're not. And for me in my life experiences, authenticity has always been a place of vulnerability and risk and ill health. So if it was to be what you might consider a Western ideal of authenticity or following the law, being someone that shows up and brings your whole self, it would have put me in actually quite violent positions. It would have put me out on the streets, particularly as a person that was in a domestic violent relationship. My very first relationship, my parents were splitting up. If I was to go into that WINS office and be my authentic self, which was to be honest, respectful and truthful, which is something that I was brought up with, I wouldn't have got a shit show in hell and getting any resources. So I had to lie through my teeth to survive. And so authenticity to me is complex. I think it needs to have a very strong undercurrent of decolonizing that term. And so something that resonates with me when I try and connect to something is authentic value really is around whakawhanaungatanga. And that's kind of like this responsive and reciprocal relationships. How authentic we are, or how authentic we're being, can be held within a system. It's held within our relationships around us. And it's also got a very strong sense of wairua, of spirit and energy. So to be authentic for me is to have the ability to breathe in my own being and really sit with that, and then continue to look at ways to promote that for my moko puna, my grandchildren, and my tūpuna, so those that have come before and those that will come after me. And I'm kind of in this generational face, which you say aho, which is a face of our tūpuna now and our mokopuna now. That to me is around whakawhanaungatanga.
Beautiful, Teah. As the group is not as big joining this fireside chat, if you want to participate or ask questions or have comments or whatever, feel free to put yourself off mute and ask, or put it in the chat as well. Because there's not that many people, we should be able to easily manage that as well. So feel free to join in. Nobody at the moment. Rachel, Martin, have you got any further comments that you wanted to, based on what you've heard from each other?
I think building on what you've both talked about, I think being able to bring your whole self to work or to your job is a massive privilege. Definitely acknowledge a lot of people can't do that in their day-to-day work, which I think is when we get to the for good conversation, like you have more of a responsibility to create change if you are able to live in that way safely. That's all I heard.
Yeah, I think the link to currently the trend of diversity and inclusion, that definitely allows more people, hopefully, to be more authentic in different situations. But I think what you're saying is absolutely right, that hasn't been the case in a lot of businesses. And you can talk about, if I look back at my own sort of career, just being a woman in a generally men's world, generally you could not show your femininity or your vulnerability, and it was seen as a great thing if you're just one of the guys, because that was much easier, right? As part of, so that was not necessarily me as my authentic self, but it helped with getting things done, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And one of the things I think I learned early on, because I came out when I was 17 and I was out, my first job, and remained out, whether the organization liked it or not. And to your point, Teah, is that that was really risky at job interviews and really risky at lots of junctures in my career. But I also knew that I was a white privileged Pākehā male, and that if I didn't use my voice for change in a pale male corporate environment that I worked in, then there was no one else at that table that was going to. And so I've definitely put my job on the line many times, and I've had extremely confronting conversations where I was willing to walk away, but I was willing to walk away because the greater good around gender diversity for females, diversity for and inclusion for Māori and Pacifica peoples in our workplace was more important than my big paycheck. And that's really shaped me and the work that I do now. And we'll probably get to it, but then becoming a parent as a gay couple of a child who's also not Pākehā has been extremely interesting to apply that lens and understand some of the other barriers and challenges that people face. And all it's made me want to do is use my voice more and louder, because to your point, you know, it's actually risky for nearly everyone in the workplace who's not a white privileged male, to be honest. You know, because you're different, and difference is scary, and your opinion will shape the status quo and challenge people's authority. And you know, and organizations don't like that. They might say they do. They want diversity, but they don't want inclusion. I think that's the key difference.
Very good point.
I've kind of felt through my childhood, I was always that person, my whānau, that was always asking the like uncomfortable questions, and I kind of liked making people be a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not sure where that came from, and I just, as you were talking about risk and, you know, having those courageous conversations, that started quite young for me. So I remember like my dad coming home drunk again, and, you know, my mum and dad just having kind of this once warriors party, and like waking up and cleaning up all the bottles. And then I brought home an AA poster, and I said, Mum, Dad, you really need to, like, I think it was like 11, ring this number. You guys have got a problem. You know, and then continuing to have those conversations, like when my brother was, he went missing, so I was kind of in the situation of being mum to my younger brothers. And then he went, you know, hikoi down the road, found him at my uncle's place, and he was getting stoned with my cousin. And so I went directly to my uncle, who's my dad's younger brother, and I said to him, you know, what the fuck are you doing? You're letting a 14-year-old get stoned in the garage. You know, you're meant to be here protecting them and making sure that and this is the younger niece talking to an older uncle who's kind of a bit bigger and
who's
scary.
The adult? Yeah.
Who's the adult? And I can say over and over again, I've had and probably put myself at risk, and fortunately not come to like any kind of violent confrontation. But that's kind of remained in me, and I really hope to enhance that or be that person. And I felt like I've spent my time trying to advocate for others, but what I'm learning now more and more so is more around the listening. There's not a lot of listening going on in terms of, if you like, authentic value. There's a lot of people saying this is what it is and this is what it is, could be. And I started this organization and I'm giving voice to this minority group and I'm giving voice to them. But they already had a fucking voice, you know, but who is actually listening? Where is this embodiment of listening, not just to ourselves, but to the environment? Yeah, so I'm just getting a little, but anyway.
That's awesome. To go on what both of you are saying, in regards to your journey to discovering what authentic means to you, or what good means to you, however you want to describe it, can you identify triggers or points or help or support or role models or that sort of thing that has actually led you to discover your authentic value? Rachel?
Yeah.
Oh, Martin?
No, go Rachel.
No, go Martin.
No, you go. Yeah, actually there's some really, really vivid ones for me. And certainly the first one for me was becoming a parent. and people who worked with me, I worked for, and were around me, said it completely changed me as a person and as a leader. I became more empathetic, I became more understanding, more compassionate. I listened more, to your point, because it's not a strength that I had. And it also made me more fierce around fighting for women in our workplace who were marginalized because they took the lion's share of caring for their whānau, while and men just got on and did what they did. So that was a huge change. And then the second one was I was working for a startup, all white men. All they ever spoke about was money. They were only interested in profit. And I just got to the end of my wits. So I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I was about our people and about culture and about inclusion and flexibility and all that kind of stuff. And I had a nervous breakdown. And I had severe fatigue. I couldn't get out of bed. And it just exhausted me constantly every day, banging my head against a brick wall for what I felt were just basic human values of respect and dignity and integrity. And the people that I worked for, they just didn't get it. And yeah, that changed me to move out of the corporate world and only work on social justice, because I lost faith in the reality of organizations' true ability to have a real purpose other than to make money. And to put my own health on the line. It took me 3 months before I could get out of bed. I couldn't even open my computer screen without having panic attacks. And that was after, this was 3 years ago. So, I was in my early 40s. And that organization pushed me to that point. That was pretty severe. So those two kind of major life things for me have really shaped the way that I see the world now, and particularly the world of work and leaders.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that real big value conflict that made you actually physically sick. That's incredible. Yeah. Rachel, sorry, you were interrupted before.
No, I guess like you said, triggers were probably not quite as harsh. They're probably a bit softer than yours, Martin. I guess one thing that was a really big part in my journey was learning about design, in the sense of coming to understand that everything in the world has been created and has been thought about, which means that everything can be taken apart and put together in a different way. So that's a big part of the way that I work, in the sense of always challenging how things are, because they don't have to exist that way. And part of that is I have a pet peeve when you talk about different social issues. And if someone ever says, oh, well, life isn't fair, usually my reaction to that is, well, actually, no, that's not good enough and we can do better. And I think design has played a big part in that for me. I think the other part, which has been much more about exploring my identity and my whakapapa, I've been really lucky to have some amazing role models in my life, especially Kataraina Davis from Ngāti Whātua, who kind of gave me, I guess, the permission to explore what it means to whakapapa Māori when you don't look Māori. And that's been a really challenging thing for me to explore, very, very uncomfortable. But I think through the last 3 years and kind of learning about Te Ao Māori and starting to kind of reconnect with that world, I've learned that there's not just one way to be Māori, and we have this weird perception, I think, New Zealand, that Māori means one thing and that Māori think in one way or talk in one way. So that's been a big journey for me around identity and authenticity in my work, learning that it's okay that I don't look the way that people would expect me to, or have the knowledge that people would expect me to if I were Māori, because I can challenge those stereotypes.
Kia ora. Teah, you sort of touched on it a little bit already, what your journey was. Did you want to add anything to that? No? Would you have any suggestions for the rest of us, you know, on this call, but in general, how do you try and influence others to also go the path that you've, or do you? I suppose I should first ask. I assume you do, but just by being yourself, you will influence others, I suppose, already, and inspire others. But do you have, how do you encourage others to become more authentic, or to explore authenticity within themselves, or people that you work with, or people that you see in your personal life, or that sort of thing? Teah?
Yeah, I find it difficult just because I don't grapple with authenticity as a mean to any actions that I have. So if I go back to whanaungatanga or whanaungatanga in terms of relationships, really just embedding aroha, which is it's not a romantic in a sense love, but it's a real deep resonance with and compassion with humanity and the world. And I guess to continuously have this, because the researcher in me is kind of have this continuous feedback loop to those that are around with me, but also to go further abroad, to go into spaces like the Mind Lab or like other spaces where I normally wouldn't be in my little echo chamber, and checking in with what's the kaupapa going on in here, and do we have something to offer, and is there some type of reciprocity that we can learn from each other? And I really feel like the more and more I learn about Te Ao Māori, and the more I learn about indigeneity and the beautiful breadth and understanding and knowledge that it has and it holds, the more that I know that it can hold the world and in terms of transforming it, and it can hold all the Western values just quite nicely, like authentic value. But it can't exist in the other way, where, you know, the Western world holds that and indigeneity fits within. So for me, that whakawhanaungatanga, that enactment of love and reverence for all, kind of has to, at the moment, you know, flip the switch in terms of our ecological health and where we are right now.
That's a beautiful way of expressing it. With the, yeah, I really like it in the way that you expressed the Western values are actually only a part, and Indigenous values are actually the whole. So therefore, yeah, it totally makes sense what you just expressed. Thank you for that. Martin?
I think for me, it's like being a parent. You know, it's about role modeling. You know, so I think we know. You know, if I look at an organizational context, you know, people are trapped in these. And I think, Ted, you know, these Pākehā notions of, you know, what good looks like in a workplace, and what they have to do to be successful, and it's all very narrow and very constrained, and being compliant, and being compliant is good, and good means you get a pay rise, and that, you know, and all that BS is BS, because those people are only bringing such a small part of their whole selves and their being to work. So they're looking for people who shine the light and show that you can be successful and be different and challenge the status quo. So I think, and I love what you said, Rachel, you know, actually also questioning and challenging and saying, actually, that's not good enough. You know, those outcomes we've created for our tamariki, you know, we've created these outcomes for Māori, you know, in terms of incarceration rates in our prisons. Like, that's all been constructed by our society, and so actually we need to question all of it and continue to question. And if we look at that now with our whānau, you know, our son was under state care with Oranga Tamariki, and has really significant challenges, and seriously, like, every part of the system is not okay. It's not okay, it's not good enough. The outcomes for everyone through that system are outrageous, and we won't keep on stopping asking the questions until something changes. And I think we all just need to do more and more of that. And people want to, but most people don't have the courage, or to your point, Teah, can't take the risk. And I think that's okay too. There's a lot of reasons why people are in a situation where they can't, but if you can, then do, you know, and if not now, then when, is always what I've said. Just because if there are 20 people in the room, there are definitely 5 other people in that room who probably sitting there going, oh, thank fuck someone asked that question, or thank God someone said that. Like, you know, and it might be a small change that you make, but those small changes, it's cliche, I know, but those small changes do create ripples, and they long-term do have an impact.
Love that. Yes, if not now, when? I like that. Did you want to add to that, Rachel?
Yeah, I think to what you were saying there, Martin, when you say encouraging people to be authentic, I guess what comes to my mind is just being human. And when you said role modeling, I think something that is really important to me and can be really hard to do, but I think role modeling in the sense of admitting your weaknesses, and when you have really fucked up and you've learned from it, because I think when you share those stories with people and be really honest about that, they can often see themselves in it, and they're more willing to listen and to learn and to try something a bit uncomfortable. Whereas I think when we hold up examples of, oh, this is what it means to be beautifully authentic, I don't think that works for people, because it doesn't create that safety to take those risks. So yeah, that's something that's really important to me.
Yeah, that's those are all such good points, and also indeed about the awareness that not everybody can, and that it's actually a privilege to be able to stand up, I suppose, in a way, and we should be aware of that. Those that are privileged, we should definitely be aware of that, and with that, give voice to those that would like to but cannot, I suppose, as well. Authenticity also often is actually described as you know, you get what you see. I'm myself, and you get what you see. And it's also technically could be applied to leaders in the world that are not necessarily doing it for good, but they always behave in the same way. And there's a certain leader that was just voted out, yay, which often get used as by people as an example of what authenticity could look like, but it's obviously not the authenticity that we're looking for. What do you think about that when it's used in that way? Or have you got an opinion on that?
I think to me, it comes back to the why. You know, well, what is the purpose of what you're trying to achieve? Is it equitable? Is it fair? Is it kind? You know, marginalizing groups so that privileged people can benefit is not for good. Privileged people already have their position of privilege. So, you know, I think when that said leader, you know, comes out with what they're coming out for, they are it's destructive, it's not kind, it's not fair. So I think we have to ask those people, you know, what's their ultimate goal behind what they're setting out to achieve. And if it's not doing right by all, if it's not set up on aroha, you know, and to your point, not fluffy love, but deep, you know, love and kindness for people, then it actually has no place. Because every single person who's born into this world, the minute they're born, they should have the same opportunity as the next person. And we know that they don't. And to your point, Rachel, our systems and processes and everything are designed to not achieve those outcomes. And so, you know, Hitler might have been authentic too, but it was very clear that his purpose was not about to set out to be kind and equitable and fair and create a humane, loving society that people care about each other. You know, so yeah, that's my take on that. There's authenticity that's good, and there's authenticity that's clearly not, and I think we all know what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to add to that, Teah?
Yeah, just tautoko that kōrero. And when when that questions come up, it's all like there's this thing that sits in my puku that I don't want to give any more to that, because there seems to be a lot of you know, energy that over the last wee while that we've been paying attention to. But I think about role model, and I think about that example in terms of that could be a particular authentic, the person being authentic within themselves. When I think about, well, you could be role modeling for a different reason, like that's not what we want to go towards. Thank you for being that great, very stark, highlighted example of where you can get so fucked up in terms of your politics and go, okay, we're going to go in this complete opposite direction, and use that as a very important part of now hopefully history. So like often in my work and the work that I am continuously seeing in public health is this importance of practicing in the presence of history. So we must know our histories, like histories, so there's many histories, there's many truths, and bringing that with us and taking those lessons forward, and making sure for the future generations we're learning from that. Yeah, I can think of an example, like a personal example for myself, and I actually had a conversation with my mum just over summer, so I know it's okay to share, but it was like bringing up things for myself when my mum was in front of her friends, and she said, oh, you know, I was a great kind of role model, you know, and it's great to be good role models for your kids, and I was like, what kind of great, what would you mum? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, you know, your 40th birthday party. And she's like, what? And so my mum's 40th birthday party was a complete mess. She had like drugs, and the police came over, and I was really embarrassed teenager and brought my friends over and was like, oh my gosh, that's not my mum. But like I really thanked her for showing me the way that I didn't want to go, and I really went the complete opposite way. So it was like, thank you, Mum, for being your authentic self, your kind of like go-lucky lady who loves to party and, you know, do her thing and do her jam. But like that had a great positive effect on me where I went the other direction. So hopefully this example, that long example, felt like 30 years we were watching that kind of stint in America, is over. And
great way of interpreting it like that. Did you want to add to that, Rachel?
I think you guys covered it off pretty well. Yeah, it comes back to that, to what end, for what purpose. Yeah, I would say at the end of the day, if you're not creating good, then it doesn't really matter how authentic you are. What's the point? Yeah, that's it.
And I think, Saskia, you know, I think it's a really big question for, you know, people going into organizations now, you know, like in this world where we're already in it, where, you know, environment and sustainability are enormous issues for us. You know, what is an organization's social license to operate? Like, what do they do? Why do they do it? And if they don't have a clear commitment back for some good, at minimum some good, then what's the point? Like, what is the point? I just really struggle. I really struggle with, you know, and if you actually ask people, and I don't know if you've done this, but if you actually ask people why they go to work, you know, why the organization they work for exists, most people can't answer it. Most organizations don't have a really clear purpose that's really entrenched in something bigger than just existing as a business. It's quite bizarre. And I'm not saying, you know, Disney, which is, you know, Disney's we make people smile, but they do. You know, they make people smile, or you know, or the happiest place on earth, or whatever it is. But I think that's I think it's a good challenge for us and future leaders when they go into businesses, going, so what's this all about? What, and actually, and if they are in it for profit, use the profit to invest back in our communities for good, to make change, to invest in the people that they serve that are making them the profit in the first place.
Absolutely. And whilst you're talking about that, there was actually a question for you in the chat from Rebecca. Will organizations be ready for authentic whole selves at work? What do you think about that?
No. I think not all organizations will be. It's going to take a lot of time.
Mm.
Yeah. I also wanted to go back to what Morgana was writing in regards to authenticity, and how she's read up on this from a book that was mentioned earlier on. I can't quite remember. Can't quite see. There's a lot written there.
I realized I got the title of the book wrong as well, because my memory is shoddy, but my impact is big. It's called Doing Good Better, and it's by a guy called William McCaskill.
That's a good.
And it's really, really good. And he basically wants to quantify good, and I think that's really important. And it goes into a lot of how I feel about authentic good, where it's a concept, and authentic good and also is often confused for optimism, I think, or if it's superficially bastardized towards optimism and false optimism. And if there's an HR experienced person in the room, I feel like they must feel the pressure to go into a business and say this smile or die attitude, where they expect people to be positive about the situation they're in, whether or not it's the worst or their pay is crap, and it's really inauthentic. And I think that maybe people have trouble defining what authenticity is, because it's been kind of shaped into something really strange by corporates who want that positive outlook, when really what they want is you to personally invest in a business you can't possibly personally invest in, because I work for a company that makes ceiling fans and I can't personally invest in ceiling fans, honestly. And we have a investment program at work where you can invest, you can get shares through work through the shareholder system. Bad at understanding it, but what I understand about it basically is they want you to invest more in the profitability of their business, because they know that it is probably too hard for you to personally connect with them and for them to personally connect with you genuinely. So I've struggled with that myself, which is hard when you have to be someone who pays bills and pays rent and works. So
yeah. But is there a byline, we make people cool?
I don't even know.
It's a cool place to work. I don't know.
Not the way I see it. I see a lot of behind the scenes animosity, and a lot of people not making any attempt to empathize or connect with each other, but to be really unhappy in their jobs and to be blaming each other all the time for the misfortunes in the workplace, that I can tell as the underling, and I see everything that are mostly bred of people being really disconnected from each other on a personal level, and just disagreeing with each other behind their backs without coming forward with what the actual issues are and working together to solve them. So I think it's quite funny that workplaces try and foster these team building exercises and stuff, but I don't know if anyone, I feel like you'd have to do, what do you call it? Sorry, my brain's getting tongue-tied. Anonymous surveying. If you did anonymous surveying in the workplace to ask people genuinely whether they thought that everyone around them was either doing a good job or if anyone around them was happy in the workplace, I think it'd be really loud, the response. In some workplaces, I feel like my workplaces have been overrepresented in kind of social disparagement, honestly. But yeah, I think that's a huge problem within the corporate world, is this false optimism and this face you have to put on, and it's trained us away from authenticity, because often authenticity is not actually like directed towards profit.
There's actually there's some pretty scary data out there, particularly from the US, around the reality of disengagement, and that actually huge amounts of people are highly disengaged at work, and you know, it's quite dire, and organizations need to wake up, because this kind of stuff we've spoken about here. If you can't be excited about ceiling fans, then do something for good that'll get people excited about working there, because there's a bigger purpose, and create an amazing, you know, community of people who care about each other and get out of bed for some other reason, and then the ceiling fans will take care of themselves, you know. And so for those organizations, you know, like ceiling fans or toilet seats or, you know, whatever widget. I mean, I worked at Coke for 7 years. If I learned anything, you've got to galvanize people around a bigger purpose, otherwise they won't come to work. That's what you've got to do. So yeah, anyway, but go on about that forever.
Absolutely.
Easily.
And unfortunately,
Case study.
unfortunately, it's 8 o'clock, but it is a very good point that we can go on about this forever. And this is always what happens in the Leading Change for Good sessions as well. Like, we have those sessions once a week for 2 hours with a little break in between. And almost every time I come away with it going, oh, we didn't have enough time. I wish we had, there was more time planned in to continue on this topic, which you obviously can do, with the community that's built around it and all that sort of thing. But these are such deep topics, right? There is so much to discuss about it, and there's so many different views on it, and there's so much change that has to happen still in a lot of different contexts with a lot of different viewpoints and stakeholders and all that sort of thing, that especially if you bring a group of people together like here, where you all come from a slightly different angle, you can go on forever to talk and discuss, and which is fantastic. This is how we're going to create that wave of change that is so dearly needed, firstly in Aotearoa, but secondly in the world that Aotearoa has gone late, right? So for anybody that is on the call that doesn't know about the program, if you want to know more, we will have an info session as well, which goes into detail more about the actual program, which is on the 18th of Feb at the same time as, and there will be emails probably sent, I assume, to everybody that signed up. So you'll get a notification of that. And then obviously the courses itself, you can join as well. We have 3 intakes in 2021, March, June, and September. The March one starts very soon. We still have some spaces, and you can still get early bird as well. And there's also still, I've completely gone blank. Scholarships, that's the one I mean, available too. So if you're interested, let us know. And I think my email will be on one of the slides. Feel free to send me an email or give me a call or WhatsApp me or whatever channel. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter, that sort of thing. So I'm sure you can find me if you want to know something. So thank you to our dear panel. This was absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing your deep thoughts and your kōrero around this amazing topic. It was really, really nice to connect with you and hear you share your thoughts. And thank you for all that listened in and asked questions. It was, it's really, it gives me a lot of hope always that we can have conversations like this, and hopefully we all learn something from it and take it away and tell somebody else, who tells somebody else, and then we create this great wave of change in New Zealand. So we'll end the session with karakia. Again, feel free to join in if you like. Ka whakairia te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakata ai, kia turuki whakata ai, homie, huie, taikie. Thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your evening.
Kia ora.
And
Kia ora,
see you all
thank you.
soon, hopefully.
Mauri ora, ka kite.
Good to meet you.
Kite.